Imagine that. Imagine this. Imagine we came to a parting of the ways and never parted. Imagine we walked down separate paths before we met, but that now we walk the same path together. Imagine we imagined that we would only be friends or maybe lovers, and that then we found that we were made for each other. Imagine this poor heart of stone could feel pain. Imagine, though, that it was harder to break than I thought. Imagine that. Imagine that when we finally get together, we will hold each other tight and just let go of all the fear. Imagine that. Imagine that every time we think of leaving each other, we think of something else instead. Imagine that we agree to laugh instead of cry most of the time, but that when we have to cry, we always laugh at the same time. If ever there is a tragedy, we will turn it into comedy. If ever there is a comedy, we will make sure not to laugh too long. If ever there is a history, we will write her story too. That's what we're going to do. Imagine that. Imagine that we are two cubs curled by a warm fire, drowsing, listening to the late autumn rain. Imagine that the sound of the rain on the roof melds with the crackling of the fire, with the gentle lowing of our breaths intermingled, with the feel of our hearts beating through our bodies intertwined. A kind of sweet musical improvisation that we, drowsy babies that we are, miss in our slumber. Imagine that. Imagine that all things are possible. Imagine that all worlds might coexist. Imagine that there was a porthole to another universe where you could have anything you want designed by fucking computers and built by giant fucking robots that never wanted, cried, or bled. Imagine that. Imagine that with all that, that the one thing that I want is for you to be with me. Imagine that. Imagine that. Imagine that.